Okay, hello there, and welcome to the first in my new series of videos called Babble. These are going to be kind of longer form videos where I'm a bit less scripted and I just kind of do things and talk about stuff as I do it. So let's jump straight in here. Today I'm going to talk a bit about Nix Flakes, and these are some features of Nix Flakes that you may or may not be aware of. Probably many of you are aware of, but I think they're kind of cool ideas, and I'm going to demonstrate them. So, of course, most of the time, if you're doing software development, you probably have a Nix Flake in the root of your project, and that's defining a dev shell, and that's a pretty common use case for Nix Flakes. Well, among many other things, they're very, very powerful. And most of the time, if you're doing software development, you probably have the Nix Flake in the root of your repo, and you have the entire dev shell defined in there. Because, of course, the tools and dependencies that you define in there, they're quite closely tied to the actual software you're developing. So it makes sense to iterate on your dev shell at the same time as iterating on the project itself. However, this doesn't make sense for all projects. I do quite a lot of infrastructure as code, DevOps, platform engineering, whatever the buzzword is this week. Back in the old days, we just used to call it systems administration, but hey. And of course, all of those projects are basically identical. So the need to actually iterate on the dev shell locally is less pertinent. Now, of course, with Nix Flakes, we do have the ability to import a remote flake. And for these kinds of projects, that might actually be kind of cool. Tied with another Nix Flake feature, which is templates, I think you can actually create a pretty cool workflow for these kinds of repositories where, when you want to start a new IAC, for example, repository, you just make a new folder, Nix Flake template down it, and everything is kind of set up. And if the Nix Flake is actually importing a remote Nix Flake, then you basically, if you have a bunch of these repos and you decide to do any kind of an update or a change to those dev shells, they can all get that update at the same time. Or if you have repositories where you need to pin on particular versions of your tooling, thanks to Nix Flakes, we still have the ability to do that, which is pretty cool. So that said, let's set about actually demonstrating this, and you'll see what I'm talking about here. So today I'm going to use Tangled. It's a nice GitHub alternative. It's a little bit out of scope to go too much into Tangled, but I think it's very, very cool. It's open source. You have the ability to self-host. I think it calls them knots. So each of the Git backends is called a knot. They provide you with one in the main site, which you can make use of. But if you don't want to use that, you can host your own, and they integrate with the main site, which is really cool. And it also has pipelines, and you can host your own runners as well. So this is all very, very cool. So in any case, I've made a repository here in Tangled. Let's go ahead and git clone this empty repository. And here we are. We're in here. Oops, that's not what I wanted. Nix Flake templates, and here we are. We can see that we're on the main branch and we have a completely blank repository. Great. So first thing we need to do, of course, for this repository is we need a flake.nix. We need basically our entry point. So let's go ahead and create that. And I'm going to do something a bit like this. Let's see here. We're going to have a description, because of course you should always have a description on your flakes, and this one is just going to be collection of Nix Flakes. And remember that semicolon. So we're going to define our outputs as always, and for this one, it's very, very simple. There's not very much going on here. We're just doing our dots. And then we're going to define some templates. So, this is a really, really cool feature of Nix Flakes, in my opinion. I'm going to define a template called tofu. And this template is simply going to point to a local path within this repository. And it's going to be tofu template. And again, you can put descriptions on these as well, which I'm going to do very quickly. And this one is template for a local, I can't spell, local flake, pointing to the tofu flake. Boom. And that's it. And we'll just add our little semicolons here, and then everything is happy. So this is very, very simple template for a local flake pointing to the tofu flake. And it's pointing towards a folder called tofu template, which is going to be in this repository. So let's go ahead and save that, and let's make that folder. So tofu template. And in here, of course, we need to kind of do the same thing all over again. We now need, well, let me go over what's going to happen here. If somebody actually runs Nix Flake init and points at this particular template, which we're calling tofu, everything that's inside the tofu template folder is going to get downloaded. This is really, really cool because we can include things like a .envrc in order to feed dearenv. We can have a .env to feed in any local parameters that we might want. And this is also kind of nice because you can set up your flake in such a way as if you do need to have little features that you turn on and off, like you can have all of your projects ingest this same template, but with environment variables alter the behavior. And you would just pop those into your .env. And you probably want a default get ignore and blah, 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 blah. There's a bunch of stuff that we're going to want here. So we'll create this just now. So let's do our flake.nix. And in this one, this is the flake that it's actually going to download, but we're actually going to reference a remote flake, which we're yet to create. So again, we're going to have a little description here. And this is flake-based dev shell pointing to remote flake. And that's all we're going to say here. And this one's going to define inputs, and we only have the one. It's going to be the tofu flake URL. And this is where the actual flake is going to come from. And now we need to figure out what our URL is going to be. So let me see here. It's going to basically be this. Oops, clicked in the wrong place. It's basically going to be this. But we're going to pop on the end where we actually want it to grab it from. So we need to say question mark ref main. We want to take this from the main branch, and we want to tell it the dir directory is tofu. Okay, this is how we're going to create all of this. And then we put a wee semicolon on the end, as always. We then need to define our outputs. So let's go ahead and do that. So outputs are tofu flake and the dots. And down here, we're going to say dev shells equal tofu flake dev shells. And that's it. That's the entire flake there. So basically what we're telling it, this entire flake is simply a remote reference. We're saying, hey, we're going to define a dev shell, but the dev shell is actually defined inside tofu flake. And if you want to find tofu flake is here. This is where you're going to find it. So let's go ahead and save that one. That's great. Now we're also going to want a .envrc because I want this to interact with dearenv. And we can simply say use flake in here. And if you have Nix dearenv installed, that's going to work very, very nicely. So yeah, it actually, yeah. I'm also going to actually add the envrc as well at this time, actually. .env. So what we're telling it is we want to load the local .env into the environment before we start the flake. That's great. And yeah, we're getting the message straight away that this particular one is blocked. That's okay. That's what we want. And then in here, we can simply define an environment variable to make sure it's working. Test equals true. And that would end up in our environment in the event that it all worked. I'm also at this time going to make a .get ignore. And this one, I'm just going to populate from my defaults that I've got down here. So I'm going to have something a bit like this. So I'm going to ignore my .terraform folders, I'm going to ignore my .drn folder, and if I'm using terragrunt, I'm going to ignore that cache as well. We don't want to be checking all of that stuff in. Excellent. So at this time, if we check what's in this template folder, if someone pulls down this template, they're going to get the flake, which references the remote flake. They're going to get a git ignore, a .envrc, and a .env. Okay, we're making good progress. Now we just need the actual flake itself, and that needs to go into a directory called tofu, because that's what we called it. And if we go in here, we're going to make a flake.nix. And this one, I'm going to pause for a moment as I type this one out, because this one will be a bit longer and this is the real one. So stand by and I'll come back with the actual flake definition. Okay, you rejoin me and I've dumped all of this out. Now this is going to look like your kind of average dev shell Nix flake. This is where all the actual work is happening. So you can see here that I'm allowing unfree stuff. I'm turning on, well, I'm making a list of the dependencies. These are the actual packages I want to install. I'm even defining my own version of GDK because I want the gcloud auth plugin to be included. I'm defining a hook. Now we're going to come back to this one later. This is a nice little kind of workflow thing that I like to have, but we'll ignore that for now. And then the actual default dev shell down here, which is what the other flake that references this one is actually entering at. It's entering at the default dev shell. It's going to take those build inputs and it's going to run the hook. And everything will just kind of work at that stage. So let's go ahead and save and quit that one. That's great. And at this stage, we're going to want to do a lock. Path tofu is not tracked by, oh, of course, the classic. This is not going to work until Git actually knows that it's here. That being the case, actually, let's go ahead and add all of this into Git at this time. So I'm going to just do a git commit, add with a message, initial commit with tofu flake template. Wow. Template. Nothing added. I did a -a. Was it supposed to be a minus capital A? Am I being stupid? Let's see what's going on here. We've got untracked files. Nothing added, but use git add to track. Okay, interesting. I probably don't normally do that command when I'm initially setting up a repo, so I'm just making myself look daft here. Can I do a git add all? Does it allow that? It does. Fantastic. Okay, now we're going to do the git commit and take out that A because we don't need that anymore. Boom. Okay, we've now got our initial commit. Great. So now if we go back into tofu, and now we're going to do our Nix flake lock. And at this stage, we're pinning all of our versions initially, and we now have a lock file. This is the only place where we need the lock file. We don't need it in the template, and we don't need it in the root, because in the root of this, we're only defining the templates. So that should all be good. Now I should be able to do my git commit add with a message. Let's see if it takes that. Locked tofu. Wow. Like, I promise my typing is better when I'm not being recorded. Okay, and now everything is in the repo. So if we come over here and we do a little refresh, we should... Oh wait, I've not done a push. Haha, git push. Then we can come over here and we'll have the repository in its state. Perfect. Okay, 2 commits. We do our initial one and then we did the lock. Okay, this is great. So we should now be in a state where we can actually make use of this repository. Now, one thing to note is that, of course, we have this ridiculously long URL for checking out, and that's going to be kind of annoying. So because of that, we're going to add this to the git registry. So let's run the git registry command. I think it's --add, is that correct? No, not git registry, Nix registry. Unrecognized flag add. So I guess it's not --, it's just add. There we go. So I'm going to make a registry entry in Nix so that we can have a short form of talking about this. And I'm just going to call it, let's call it deep hack flakes. And we're going to point it to this particular, no, that's not right. And we're going to point it to this particular repo. I want to use my SSH. There we go. Let's point it to there. And then the important thing is we need to tell it what the entry point is. So I'm going to do hash tofu. Because if we take a little look at this flake, we'll see that we have defined a template called tofu. So that's where we want it to go. Although, actually, sorry, that's when we get to the init point. For the register, we just want to add that. It's not an absolute path. Okay. We need to add, I think it's SSH plus git, like that. Nope, that's not correct. Okay, stand by. I'll go and find the correct URL. Okay, I figured it out. I made 2 mistakes. It's git plus SSH is the URL type, not SSH plus git. Also, it doesn't like the format where you have a semicolon between the server and the kind of directory part, I guess. So I replaced the colon with a slash, and that should now work. So now we should be able to access this repository using Nix Flakes as deephack-flakes. Fantastic. So let's say that we're going to start a new project. Let's make a directory, and we're just going to call it test1. Let's go into test1. Great, we've got a completely empty repository, and if everything is good, we should be able to issue the command nix flake init and provide a template. And what did I call this again? I said deephack. I think I made it deephack-flakes. And then we can do a hash and the name of the flake we want, which in this case is tofu. So it's never actually connected to that before. We need to say yes. And let's give it a few moments. And it should find it. Perfect. And you can see here that the init command has written the files that were inside the template directory. So we now immediately have the .env, .envrc, the .ignore, and the flake in question. Let's see if all of this works. Let's run derenv allow, and the module path has unsupported parameter ref. Okay, fantastic. So we need to work out how to actually fix this. Stand by one moment and I'll go and refine that. Okay, after some trial and error, I worked it out, and it was actually the URL again. I needed git plus SSH in front of it, and I needed to replace the colon with a slash. And you can see now that it is, in fact, building the dev shell. And it has correctly resolved the inputs for tofu flake, flake utils, Nix packages, etc. So if we give this a few moments, it's going to go ahead and fetch the defined packages, and we should be in a position where it actually has all the correct stuff. Boom. Okay, that's looking pretty good. So at this stage, we should find that we have tofu. We do. Fantastic. Okay, so that has actually worked nicely. So in something to note, we have, of course, at this time, generated a flake lock. So this now means that the version of this remote flake that we're fetching, we're kind of pinned to it forever. If you wanted a situation where you could auto-update, basically, you need to take a look at your envrc, and your use flake line, you need to add refresh. And this means that as the flake is updated, you will actually pick up newer versions. So I guess in some situations you may want to lock, and in some situations you may want to follow the remote flake. You can see here, because I've changed the envrc, it's now blocked it again, and I would have to do a derenv allow. Before we do that, let's jump back into our templates and actually fix the error that I made there. So I think it was in the actual tofu template flake.nix. Let's fix this up. So let me demonstrate exactly what I was talking about. This needs to be git plus SSH, and this semicolon here needs to come out and be replaced with a slash. And then if we wanted to, we could define a ref and a directory, and that should now work. So let's go ahead and save that, and we're going to commit that change. Corrected the tofu URL. Boom. Let's git push that. That worked nicely. And let's make our way back to test1. And we're gonna actually update this. We're gonna derenv allow it again. And the first argument must be a flake expression. Did you mean to use flake dot? Ah, yeah, I probably did actually. So there you go. That's a mistake that I've made. You have to tell it which flake you want if you're going to add parameters. And there we go. We're back in. So let's see if we can kind of summarize here. What have we actually created here? We now have a repository which has templates in it. Each of those templates has a bunch of files that will kind of prep the repository with, and the flake that it actually delivers simply points to a remote flake. So we can then basically follow that across multiple projects, which is kind of nice. And there's the actual flake that it will deploy. The last thing I'll show quickly is this hook idea. The idea here being is that if you have any kind of dynamic templating that you want to do, you could actually have a situation where a menu, for example, will pop up and prompt the user for certain inputs, which can then be used in templating a config file. And once the file is actually created, the menu.sh in this example would no longer run. So the first thing you're going to check is you're going to do an if and see if the resulting template has already been created. Very, very kind of naive approach to templating, because of course it doesn't keep track of whether or not the templating code has changed since the original template was made. But I think in most cases you don't want your config files to be clobbered in that way. So anyway, this is a very, very simplistic approach. And in the menu.sh, what I'm tending to do is I'm also having a .envrc, and in here I would have kind of menu equals true if I want the menu to run, because of course power users might be irritated by this automatic templating, and so if they don't want it to run, they would add menu equals false. And have that kind of disabled. So give me 1 sec and I'll quickly template up what that would look like, and I'll demonstrate that quickly. Okay, so here's a quick menu.sh, which is an example of templating a TerraGrunt file, and it asks the user for a couple of parameters to kind of initialize their project. But you could do kind of all sorts of stuff with this. So here's the code for this here. This is all going to be in this repository, by the way, in Nix Flake Templates, which I will include a link to in the show notes below. So if you want to dig more into these examples, you can easily do so. But you can see that it basically asks you if you want to generate the template, and if you say no, then it will touch the file, but it'll be an empty file, and you're then free to kind of go ahead and edit that manually, which is great. Now, the other thing that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to edit the envrc, because we want to I'm going to actually add the refresh into this example. So that's in there. And then we also want to edit the .env, because we're going to have this dependent upon an environment variable called menu, and we're going to set that to true. And then lastly, we need to actually edit the resulting flake inside the tofu folder, because I had the hook all commented out. So you can see here's my hook. I'm going to comment all of this out, and basically all it's going to do is it's going to check and see, oh, actually I called it tofu menu. Let me go and fix that in a moment. In fact, well, let's just fix it here. If menu. Well, that seems a bit generic. That's probably why I made it tofu menu originally. But anyway, if menu is true, then make the menu sh executable and run it. Otherwise, just echo out that menu is turned off as a little reminder that it's not running. So you've got kind of two things that will inhibit the menu. You can either set menu to false, or you can already have a root.hcl. And in both cases, that will cause it to not execute. So let's go ahead and commit these changes now. So we've got all of that kind of stuff. I guess, I called it menu hx. Oh, silly boy. Okay, let's fix that. Tofu template menu hx should actually be tofu template menu.sh. There you go. There you go. Obvious mistakes are obvious. Okay, so that should all be set now. So let's go ahead and add tofu template menu.sh. Great. And we should be in a situation now where basically everything is ready to go. Okay, so we're going to do git commit, added the menu, boom, push it all out, boom, great. Let's come back out here and let's do this all over again. Let's do a new test called test 2, and we're going to do Nix flake init template, deep hack flakes. We're going to take tofu as our entry point. It's done. CRN boom. And, oh, the path is wrong, has an unsupported parameter ref. Ah, right, okay. That's still a parameter that actually Tangled doesn't support. So that's okay. We're going to go ahead, we're going to go ahead and quickly fix that. That's an easy one. We simply take out the ref. It does support dir, though, which is kind of funny. Maybe it calls it something other than ref. I'll need to look into that later, but that's not important. Is this still wrong? Yeah, this is still wrong. How did this not update? How did this not update? Must be cached somewhere. Okay, interesting. That's interesting. Have I just found another problem? Yeah, this is also not updated. Right, okay. So I've come across a new problem. My garbage collection needs to run, perhaps, and then we'll get the new version. Interesting. This is something I didn't know about. So here we are. We're live and we're finding new problems. Let's garbage collect my my Nix store, and then let's try and do this again. I guess there needs to be a lock file here somewhere that's causing this not to work. Go ahead and tell me in the comments below what I've done wrong, because I am still learning Nix. And like I said, this is the danger of doing these things live. You're going to show off the things that you don't know. But hey, this is how we learn. So in a moment, my garbage collection should finish up. Anyway, we'll make a new directory in the meantime. And we're going to do Nix flake init from a template. Depack flakes. Tofu. We'll wait for that garbage collection run to finish. I'm thinking it already did because my fan is spun down again. Let's try it now. Yeah, so we have the unsupported parameter again. Okay. And if we bat the env, what is going on? What have I done wrong here? Yeah. The remote end shows the correct version. So why am I not getting... Why am I not getting this? That's very interesting. How does this work? Stand by, I'm going to figure this out. Okay, so I've just learned something that I didn't know. When you run the Nix registry add command, you are effectively locking that version of the flake with that short name. So you are effectively generating a lock file. So I can run the add command again, I believe, and it should actually update the lock at that time. So now let's try and do this again. I don't know. I don't know if this is going to work, but let's see what we get. So if we now do a Nix flake init with the template, deep hack flakes, and we take tofu, let's see what happens this time. Okay. And is this the updated version? It still isn't. This is still not working. Okay. This is very interesting. Right. More investigation. Okay. I've discovered a new option that I can supply to the Nix flake init command, and it's refresh. So I think we're bumping up against caching here, because if I run the registry command and I tell it, actually, sorry, the Nix flake command, and I show it to give me ask it to give me the information for deep hack flakes, you can see that it has a locked URL and it has a revision here. So I think this is our problem. We basically have a cached version. So if I now say Nix flake init refresh, that tells it to consider all previously downloaded files obsolete. And then we give it the template deep hack flakes hash tofu, we might get a better result. Yeah, you see it's actually reaching out. And that's looking much more sensible. Okay, here we go. So before we do derenv allow, let's just very quickly check that we have our variables. We do. Our environment variables are here. And I think we discovered that the flake is still wrong in so much as it has a ref. And I don't think Tangled actually supports a ref. So let's take the ref out for now. It'll be a mission later to find out what it calls that particular parameter. And at this stage, we should be able to say derenv allow. And something good should happen. Let's see. It's reaching out, and here we go. Here's our little script that we created. Welcome to Tofu Template. Do you want to initialize TerraGrunt with company defaults? I'm going to say yes. It asks for what my project name is. I'm going to call it test1. Actually, no, we're in test 2. Region, let's go Europe West 3. Boom. Oh, and this has actually kind of entered a loop. Welcome to Tofu Template. I'm going to say no in this instance. I'm going to assume that I gave the wrong file name in this generator. So, on saying that. Oh, yeah. Checking, see if there's a TerraGrunt HCL file. That's my problem. It should actually be root.hcl. Let's fix that. So there you go. There's a further error. I'm going to update that in the Git repository, but I'm not going to do that on camera because that's less important. So I can now come out of this folder, and if I go back into test 2, my dev shell runs, but it doesn't actually run the menu again. At this stage, the menu is done. And I can now bat out root.hcl, and boom, there we go. We have a predefined TerraGrunt file ready to use. So that was a bit interesting. It was kind of fun doing debugging sort of live there. I hope that's, well, these are the Babble videos, so I did say they're going to be kind of live and unscripted to a degree. So I hope that was in some way useful. And I don't know about you, but I learned something today. So it turns out that there is a bit of caching going on there. I wonder if there's some kind of an option we can add to the registry to tell it to always check for later versions. I guess in a way it is kind of nice that it pins, and it's also kind of nice that you can issue that refresh command. One last thing that we could check, actually, let's go back to the overview here. We can see that the last commit here, let's just zoom that in a little bit, 2CBC 3CCE. If we actually take a look at the registry again, is it actually going to show that it's locked at that version now? Yes, it is. Okay, that's interesting. So if you do a nix flake init command with refresh, it will actually update what it's going to actually pull the next time. So that is in effect how you're going to do that. I wonder if there's a way of defaulting it, but anyway, we'll worry about that another time. So anyway, this was a kind of long, rambling babble, as it were. I hope you all enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time.